There's many different ways to skin a cat. There's many different ways to build a bubble application. This is the way that I typically do mine. This is quite a standard sort of structure where you've got like an internal portal or dashboard page with different sections. So that's one thing that we're going to talk about here. But also, if I go to my little drop-down menu, I can open an account page. This is on a separate page. And if I log out, I've also got a little bit of a onboarding flow here where the user goes through multiple steps. That's obviously not me. So they go through an onboarding form like this, multiple steps before they can get to a dashboard portal. So what I have there is an authentication page. That's this guy here, of course, an onboarding flow. So they're going to go through step by step through this onboarding flow. And there's multiple sub views or sub steps. There's a separate sort of settings page. There's even a separate like page that you might have for public facing information. So this is a job listing site, which, by the way, this is the app that we're building in my Bubble course, which I'll link to in the description. So you might have a public facing listing page like this. And then you've got something like a dashboard page with multiple sub views that the user can cycle through and even view some information in sort of a modal or a pop-up and view like sub views. So we've got this jobs view. You can click into one of these jobs and then view some more information, even viewing now a nested pop-up. So I want to walk through how this is all structured, how this is all set up, because I think it's a really useful structure for a lot of different applications. It's quite simple to understand as well. So start with this authentication page. So on this authentication page, there's 3 subviews here. So you've got the sign up view, you can click on already have an account, and you go to the login view, and you can also access this forgot your password view. The thing that I want you to notice here, if I just hit back, is how the URL changes here. So right now we're on the off page, that's the actual name of the page that we're on, but we've got this extra little segment in the URL here, which says sign up. If I click on already have an account, then that's going to change to login. If we're going to click on forgot your password, that's now going to say reset password. So how that works is I've got this one main group here on my auth page, and inside of this group, I've got subgroups for each of my forms here. And each one of these is hidden by default and just has some conditional logic under which it should become visible. And that conditional logic is looking at the URL. So get path from page URL, that's what we're doing here. The path in Bubble is always the immediate segment right after the page name. So the page name here is auth, and then the path value is this guy here. Now reset password, as well as login and sign up, I've stored all of these inside of an option set. So inside of my database here, I've got these different nav option sets. So I like to have an option set for each collection of subviews that I'm using within my application. So here within the auth page, these are all subviews, and you'll see shortly that we're doing the same structure here on our dashboard page and the same structure or the same pattern on our onboarding page for our onboarding steps. But just on the auth page, just for now, I've got this nav sign up option set here, and that's just made up of the particular options that I have. And what that means is that for each of my views here, each of my subgroups, I can have a condition which is just going to look at the URL, see what that path value is, and if it corresponds to one of the options in that nav sign up option set, then it's going to make itself visible. And then to switch between the views, like for example, when we click already have an account, that simply launches an action which is going to go to the page, the same page that we're on, and we just pass in the display value, which is going to correspond to either sign up or login, right? It's going to pass in that display value for that particular view or that particular nav sign up option, right? Either sign up, login, or reset password. Right, so we're pushing values into the URL, and then our views, our content on the page is looking and reacting to whatever that URL value is, or specifically that path value here, login. And if you're going to set up this kind of structure, you'll need to account for the edge case where there is no path value in the URL. So something like this, we're just going straight to the auth page. So if I try to go here in step-by-step mode, there is a workflow that I'm going to launch here. When the page is loaded and the path value is empty, then we're actually going to display some kind of default value in the URL. So we're actually going to display the sign up value. That's like our fallback option. So then sign up appears, and then of course the sign up group is then reacting. Its visibility condition is kicking in to make itself visible. Now, why URL paths and not custom states? Custom states is one of the ways that you'd quite often handle this, especially while you're just starting out learning with Bubble. Well, it's really simple. It's due to the fact that I can now arrive on this page as a user from anywhere else. Okay, so if I was using custom states, I would always have to arrive basically on the sign up page and then navigate to the login section, or then navigate to forgot your password. But because we are using the URL here as the routing mechanism, if you will, the source of truth for what should actually be displayed here on the page, that means that I could direct my users, for example, straight to the login form. So on my homepage, for example, I've got two buttons here, sign up and log in. If I click sign up, it's going to take me to this URL with the sign up URL path. If, however, I hit log in, it's going to take me to the login form. Okay, that's one benefit. The other benefit is that you can make use of the browser's natural handling of the back button. So if I go and hit forget your password here, and now I hit back in my browser, I'm just going to go straight back to that last path that I was on, that last view. If you're on a custom state, well, Bubble is just going to think that the last page that we were on was actually the home page here, and it's just going to go back. So URL paths much better in these navigation scenarios than using custom states. Custom states I might still use for something like this, right? A little toggle where I'm just trying to say, hey, what has the user selected here? I don't need this to be a state that is persistent beyond page refreshes. I don't need to load this page up with candidate pre-selected. Although if I did, that would be something that I would probably be thinking about a URL parameter for. So I would be going role equals candidate, right? If I wanted to pre-select it with a particular option. And in this context, in this application, that might be something worth doing. Right now, though, it's just set up with custom states. So once I sign up as a user, I'm navigated to the onboarding form. The onboarding form has the same fundamental approach here, okay? This next button here, if we go and inspect it within our editor, so it's this next button, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna first detect what step of the form are we on, and there's 3 steps here. We're either gonna be on the user info step, the company info step, or company details, and these again are just options in another option set. So I've got my option set nav onboarding where I'm storing these options. We're using one next button, and then we're using some conditional logic at the workflow level to decide what we're gonna do. So I've got various custom events here, which are firing in order to, one, navigate the user to the next step in the form and potentially save their progress as well. So complete user info, for example, if we go and inspect that custom event, what it's gonna do, it's gonna save the values that the user has entered here. It's also going to save the current onboarding step, right? Which again is one of these onboarding steps. And then navigate the user to the subsequent step, which is company info. And it's doing that in the same way as we just did it on the off page, which is pushing some data into the URL, namely this company info display value. Now, what's nice about saving the user's progress, I'm actually going to add the debugger here. And then I'm going to load this page without the path again to show you how this progress works. Now, one of the things that I do on page load here when there is no URL path is I put into the URL path the last step that the user was on, their current onboarding step. Right? That was something that we saved when the user hit next. So that means that I'm always able to route the user to the right place in the form, because let's say they come here to the home page again, and then they try to access their dashboard. Well, what happens when they try to access their dashboard? If we go try to open up the dashboard here, is there is another workflow that kicks in here to redirect the user back to onboarding. And it's gonna do that when it detects that the user hasn't finished onboarding, which is a field on the user. It's actually a date field that we set to be the current date and time when the user completes onboarding. So we'll see that in a minute. But what this redirect condition is doing is detecting that it's empty. And so it's sending the user back to the onboarding page. Once they land on the onboarding page, this workflow kicks in. We're passing in a URL parameter that's telling the page that the user hasn't completed onboarding. That's going to then allow us to display some kind of alert. So to give context to the user as to why they were just redirected, we are going to push into the URL, push into that path, the step value that they were last on, right, which we saved. But otherwise, everything is the same as the auth page, where we navigate to the next step using a URL path. But because we're in the onboarding flow, I've got these custom events set up. Depending on what step the user is on, we're going to trigger a bunch of actions that are contextual, relevant to that particular step in the form. So for example, on this company information step, we actually create a thing in our database called a company, which is what a user is going to be able to manage in their dashboard. We're also going to save on the user the current onboarding step, right? So that we can redirect the user to the relevant step once they close out this form if they haven't completed onboarding. And this, for the record, this company details, this is the third step now in the form. So it's the subsequent step that the user is going on to. So right now they're on company info. We're now saving as their current onboarding step, the next step that they are yet to complete. And then we push that path value for that next step into the URL so that they can finish what they're doing. And then finally, the last thing that we do is when the user completes this form, which we can detect by saying, hey, what step are they on when this next button is clicked? Well, it's company details, right? Which is one of those options in our nav onboarding option set. And then we're going to do a bunch of things that are relevant to this step in the form. Namely, we're going to maybe update some information about the company based on the input values here, but we're also going to critically save on the user the date and time that they've finished onboarding. Okay, so whether or not this value is empty is what is going to determine whether we're going to redirect the user off of the dashboard page when, for example, they try to go to the dashboard page before completing onboarding, which we just saw a few minutes ago. And then, of course, we're just redirecting them to another page in the application. Now, I'm going to load this dashboard page up as a user who's actually created some jobs so we can see this in action. So we've got our recruiter portal. We are on the jobs path. So just as before, as you probably predicted, we've got a specific option set here for the views, the tabs within the dashboard or the portal page here. And this is a job listings site. This is a dashboard for recruiters. And so there's a bunch of things that they might want to manage here. They can see all of the different applications for the jobs that they've posted. They can manage that high level information about their company. And they can also add some tags so that they can tag applications that come in. Now the sidebar here, it's showing all of those portal page options that we just saw defined in that option set. And it's actually handling all of that within a repeating group that just makes it really easy to manage the styling. So when one of these buttons is clicked inside of the repeating group cell for a particular view, right? Then all I'm actually going to do is go to the current page. I'm just going to push into the path value, this guy here, the display value for the view that was clicked. So I click here on applications. We're going to now go to the recruiter portal page and send in that applications value. So if you look at the URL, you'll see that applications value is immediately visible and the content on the page has changed. And the way that content visibility is working is exactly the same way as what we've just seen on the auth page and the onboarding page, where we've got these different subgroups, these different views that each have a condition to say when they should be visible. And that's again looking at the path value within the URL. What you might not be already doing is putting all of these views here inside of their own reusable element. Now, this is something that I highly recommend that you do to keep your application organized, not just conceptually in terms of you being able to quickly understand which part of the application you need to go into and change when you want to update your application, but also just practically speaking, you're not going to clog up this workflow tab with all of the actions for all of the views on your dashboard page. You're not going to clog up the elements tree here with all of the elements across all of these different reusables. You can just go into each of these reusables one by one, and everything that you need to manage this is all visible. Now let's draw our attention quickly to this sub view for jobs, because that's particularly interesting. You'll see that the URL structure here actually has a unique ID for a particular job. It's in fact this job here. And how that is working, if we go step-by-step mode, I click on one of these guys, and we are going to again go to page. We're going to use that go to page action, but we're going to send the unique ID for the job that was clicked in the URL. So if we actually go and inspect this action where we're going to the recruiter portal page, I've wrapped this inside of an arbitrary text operator because it's just a lot easier to work with. We've got the path value for the current tab that we're on. So that's the jobs portal view. And then the unique ID of the job listing that was clicked, okay, separated by a /. And that, of course, if we look at the URL here, when I hit run next, results in this appearance in the URL. So what about the visibility condition for the content? Well, that is being handled within this job section reusable element. That's how we're keeping things organized here. And if I open up here this job details group, right, you'll notice a couple of interesting things. One is that it has a type of content job listing. This is what all of the children elements inside of this group are inheriting. They're inheriting this data source. And the job listing itself is being pulled down from the URL depending on this unique ID. So that looks like a get data from page URL expression. And then this time we're not looking at the path value, because the path value specifically is only this first entry in the URL after the page name. Okay, so this is the page name. This is the path. And this is just one of potentially many page segments. However, what's also interesting is that Bubble considers everything here after the root domain, this being the root domain here, well, this and version test being the root domain for all intents and purposes. It considers everything after that to be something called a path segment. Right, so we've got 3 path segments: recruiter portal, jobs, and this unique ID. And that means that in order to get this guy, this unique ID, we have to say, hey, we want the 3rd path segment. Right, so path segment is going to return these 3 guys here as a list. And then we want to grab the 3rd item here and say that's actually a job listing type thing. So Bubble is automatically going to convert that unique ID that it finds into a job listing that then we can display and do things like display its title value and that sort of thing. And then we can also just hit back here just to go straight back to that portal page that we were just on. Nothing fancy there. It's just a workflow which is going to go back to the recruiter portal and just pass in the relevant path value. Okay, so we're just using the URL here as like a traffic light system. It is at any moment in time telling all of the traffic, so to speak, all of the elements on the page, whether they should be visible or not, right? What they should do. Should they stop and wait? Should they become visible, right? What should they do? So this URL is the central source of truth, and all we're ever doing is we're pushing values into it and we're pulling data out of it, or we are rather having our elements react to the data that is encoded within the URL here. And then finally, we've got this account page as well, which is actually its own separate page. So if we look at our model here, right, here's our dashboard page, and each one of these subgroups is a reusable element. Our off page, we didn't use reusable elements there because it's overkill in that context, but they're all just groups with conditional visibility. Same thing on the onboarding page. We've got this settings page, which is just standalone. Now you could have this settings page be just another section on the dashboard page, another view rather. However, the thing to consider here is like, how often is a user going to be going to the settings page, number one, and number two, is settings something that is conceptually independent from the sorts of things that a user might be dealing with here on the dashboard page. And I decided that it just becomes a little bit easier to manage over on its own settings page. It's not like a configuration for my workspace or my environment. It's rather just a place where I'm managing the data that's unique to me as a user. And this is very common if you go to something like Mobbin here and you look at different dashboard pages, you'll notice that very often they've got like a little user icon, which is separate than all of the other settings that might be managed within their account. So by following this kind of design pattern, we're going to help our users out because they're already expecting to use applications in this sort of way. This is something called Jacob's Law. Users will enjoy using applications that are similar to the applications that they're already used to. Right? You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You can follow the same sort of design pattern here. And also the fact that I don't consider my users will be visiting this page that often. I don't mind it being on a separate overall page. Where I want to be nesting views, like we're doing over here, is where I want the user experience to really be snappy. I want the user to really just be able to go to different sections within the navigation structure here instantaneously, because I imagine that they'll be cycling through very quickly these kind of sections. And this again mimics the same kind of experience that they're going to be used to. Now, if you want to learn how to secure a page like this so users who aren't authorized can't access it, then click on one of the videos that'll be hovering out over here somewhere. And if you want to learn how to build this thing from scratch, then do check out my course. I'll link to it below. You can learn how to build this whole application production ready from scratch. Otherwise, happy bubbling.